back.
And we're back.
We just watched The Haunting from 1963.
Interesting.
Yeah. So a couple trivias that I had today. So first of all, like we said before the break, this is the same director as West Side Story and The Sound of Music. He also was the lead editor on Citizen Kane.
Oh.
So a very interesting pedigree for this guy.
Yeah.
Even more interesting, he was born in Winchester, Indiana, where I went to high school.
Let's go. That's really cool.
It's really cool and really weird.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And like, didn't he? I looked up kind of his whole little story there for a minute, and like he went to a liberal arts school somewhere unnamed. They didn't even know the name of it. Like a very small school, and then went there for like 2 years, and was like, I'm moving to Hollywood to make moving pictures, and
Good for him.
there you go.
I'm not originally a Hoosier, but Winchester, Indiana, which is very close to Anderson, which is where I went to college. It's, I mean, these guys got to claim this guy. I mean, it's really cool.
We got him, and then we got
David Letterman. He wasn't.
yeah,
he
he's-
went to Ball
yeah,
State.
he went to Ball
but
State.
yeah.
There's another guy from Winchester who was in like a 60s rock and roll band, like early 60s, like
Paul McCartney.
yep,
Mr. Leopard.
Paul McCartney is from Winchester.
Yeah.
No, it's like one of a Beatles-esque band, but they were like one of those one-hit wonders, you know.
Davy
like,
Jones
The Stripes.
from the Monkees.
maybe.
No, he was from the UK too.
Oh, okay. It may have been. I for some reason I thought it was a monkey though.
Oh, yeah.
It might have been a monkey. And there's like this one pizza place in Winchester that has his picture all over the wall, and like he owned a house that was a couple houses down from this pizza place. It was a whole thing. Anyway,
Sure.
so that's kind of cool. Small town guy. Obviously made 2 huge movies and had a hand in Citizen Kane,
Yeah.
another huge movie.
Definitely.
So he chose to shoot this in black and white. He had the option to shoot it in color. Obviously, we're in that kind of early 60s, mid 60s. Technicolor was happening.
Yeah.
And he chose to shoot this film in black and white because he thought it added to the moodiness. He met Shirley Jackson, who did the book, and said, hey, were there any other titles for the book that you ever considered? Because I feel like Haunting at Hill House is just a little too much for a movie title. And she said, oh, the only other thing I ever thought about was just The Haunting. And so he's like, that's what we're calling the movie.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. He read a review of the book and immediately went to her to buy the book rights. So like this was like he's like, I'm making this into a movie. And then apparently I have not read the original novel, but from what the people say, this adaptation of the movie is much closer to the novel than the Netflix series was.
Sure.
Which I also heard that the Netflix series drew inspiration from another like really early 50s horror novel as well, and that's where a lot of the family stuff comes in. Because in the Netflix series, all of these people are related, and they're all brothers and sisters.
Right.
And then in The Haunting, they're not related.
And I feel like, as far as a written work goes, it would be tough to do that many points of view.
Yeah.
As the if you're not familiar with the Netflix series, it's a family, and there's, I would say 5 off the top of my head without thinking, at least 5 points of view. There's probably 2 or 3 episodes that are kind of like full family episodes, and then at least one per view per person.
Yeah.
So like each person has their specific episode of their story. So novel form, it really just wouldn't work. I've read like one book where that has worked. That hasn't been shorts. If it was shorts, it would work.
Right. Like an anthology.
I read a book called Winesburg, Ohio that kind of does that, where it's like separate storylines in one specific setting. It's good. It would be tough. It would be a tough literary work to pull that off in unless if the storylines didn't connect. Like the place was the connector, the storylines didn't connect, but that's not the case here. So
Yeah.
I like that for this movie they kind of went with the single, like what'd you call it?
First person omnipresent.
Thank you. Where we only really heard the thoughts of one character versus too many, or we got too deep in each person's setting. For a 2-hour film, it would be too much.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, let's talk about what happened in this movie. What was the plot? What was the story of this movie?
It was a lesbian love story set in a haunted house.
Kind of.
well, yeah, it could be.
Kind of.
That's what I got out of it.
Oh, Alex.
And a real pulsating door.
Oh. So this guy is just come to really party.
So we have the owner of the house is Luke. He's the one that has the money.
Yep.
It's the Chad, yeah.
And then he's allowing, I already forget.
Professor Eggs.
He's allowing Mr. Mustache to
His name does start with an M.
Yep.
I'm trying to
To
remember
essentially
what it is.
do like a paranormal investigation.
Yep.
Kind of before that's really a thing. So he's doing this study. He invites character Theodora, who is known to be some form of empath.
Yep.
They say ESP. Obviously, that's a super outdated term at this point. But and then he also invites our kind of star of the show, Eleanor, who I don't necessarily know why he would have invited her, because she doesn't necessarily have any special gifts, but she experienced a trauma.
Yeah. One, he says, he invited a lot more, and
Right.
and they didn't,
She
one by
was part
one.
of
They,
the B team.
yeah. Probably.
She didn't read the application.
Yeah. She didn't read the fine print, that's for sure. Yep.
So he invites them all, these couple ladies out there, and then Luke, the homeowner, is out there as well, and they are basically just spending the night there for a few days. They don't necessarily run any like tests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's no science really being done here. It's like, hey, come out here, stay here for a few days, and we'll see if anything happens.
Yeah.
And fill out a packet every night.
Oh yeah. Every night you have to like
About psychokinesis.
you have to
Yes.
like document if you felt or saw anything. So that was kind of interesting in the fact that like they tried to make it seem like they were approaching it from like a very scientific way, yet there weren't any actual experiments being done.
Not a single test tube.
They'd just be like, everybody come in here.
You feel it?
It's a cold spot.
You feel it?
It's cold.
You feel it?
It won't
then-
show up on temperature gauge, but it's cold.
And then, but you see the guy's breath.
You did
In
see the
one
guy's breath.
shot, you see the
pretty
guy's
cool.
breath.
Yeah,
That's cool.
that's cool. That's an
That's
effect
cool.
they would have had to do
I'm
somehow.
just saying that's cool. But wouldn't that show up on a temperature gauge? I'm just saying. Like, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
So that kind of happens, and then Eleanor just kind of, the movie's really about her and her sort of descent into madness.
Definitely.
I think all of the best haunted house stories really juxtapose, is this a ghost? Is this a haunting?
Yeah.
Or is the protagonist losing their mind? Like
Yes.
that's kind of the basis
Absolutely.
for a good ghost story.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, because it's kind of like in any movie, once it's revealed, you lose momentum. Mm-hmm. So you have to hold on to the question mark as long as possible. And honestly, this movie, I would say for our viewing party and what we're used to, it probably lost us a little earlier than normal, but not saying it's bad.
Yeah.
I think I think our viewing party we're used to just a little more modern, a little more.
Yeah,
but
I think that's totally a sign of the times. It's it's definitely a 60s movie.
Yeah, but they hold on to that part of it really well. Of they don't give. I mean, even till the end. I mean, was it kind of a paranormal experience that led her to the car accident, or was it just the guy's wife running out and kind of making her lose control? I think they held on to that really well. And that's something that is tough, because as soon as you reveal, anytime that you reveal, okay, this character is larger than death, larger than your spirit, larger than whatever we have going on, then kind of you've now pigeonholed yourself into that lane,
right?
Which is kind of the death of the movie, so to speak. Like any horror movie tries to hold on to that as long as possible, and I would say they did that very well.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what this movie looked like. So to wrap up kind of what happened. So it's about Eleanor's descent into madness. She kind of has a couple almost fatal accidents or potential suicide attempts, however you want to look at that, from either jumping off of the veranda to climbing up the broken staircase and potentially falling off of that. And then she ends up, they're kind of sending her off and like, hey, you need to get out of here. This is too much for you. We should have, asked you to leave a lot sooner. And she's like, no, I want to stay. I love this place. And they're like, nah, you just need to get GTFO. Like, there's something attached to you here or whatever. And like, it's going to be better if you leave. So she's trying to drive away. And, from what we see in the car, she seems to be losing control of the wheel. Her monologue thoughts that we hear is that there is some kind of force yanking the wheel around, and then eventually she swerves into a tree and car accident. She's dead. She gone.
That's the same tree.
Yeah, and that is the same tree that the original owner of the house, whenever it was built, his wife, her carriage crashed at that same tree, and she also died. So that's kind of what happens in the movie. The house has a very death-filled history from the person who built it. His wife died in this carriage accident on the way to the house. She never even got to lay eyes on the house from the story. And then there were a few other people who lived in the house. One of them hung themselves from a balcony. One of them just kind of slowly died of old age there. So, like, a lot of people have died here.
The other guy had a drowning accident.
Oh, that's
which
right.
is an interesting way to phrase that.
He didn't drown. He had a drowning accident.
Like, did he accidentally drown? Did he, like...
Aren't all drownings accidents?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Just saying.
Because he wasn't forcefully drowned by another person, so...
Yeah. There you go.
Accident.
Yeah, that's
oopsies.
So that's kind of what happens. How it looks, obviously this is, again, a 1963 movie, and it's shot in black and white. I think what's neat about this movie is partially the look of it, in that they're able to pull off some pretty cinematic moments way before practical effects have even entered into the picture. So there's not a lot of effects in this movie. So there's not a lot of effects in this time period. So really what they're having to rely on are camera tricks. So there's one episode early on when it's detailing one of the deaths. One of the women who lived in the house fell down the stairs. And the camera kind of follows her as she's falling and is kind of tumbling around. And then the camera lands upside down. And that is like her point of view, because she has fallen down these stairs and like she's dead and like looking upside down. And then whenever the camera switches from her POV back to like showing kind of her dead body, like there were no real effects happening there, but it was a really cool shot.
Yeah.
And it was an artistic shot and like it looked good. Actually, that was the most recent post on our Instagram, was that specific shot. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about, check that out.
Yep.
But it was a really good shot, and that's why I chose it for the Instagram post, because it's one of the most artistic and creative shots in the movie. And then also kind of the big effect moment that does happen in this movie is there's a moment towards the end where the door is like pulsating.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, as Alex so delicately said before, it's pulsating.
Yes.
And I actually read that is really the only practical effect in the movie, because the only effect that happens in the movie that's not just a camera trick. And how they did that was they built that entire door out of rubber, and there are stage hands on the other side of it, just literally pushing on it. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, anybody want to talk about how the movie sounds score-wise?
Yeah, I mean, real quick, I'm actually going to dip back to how it looked.
Yeah,
I
go
thought it
for
was
it.
great. I'm black and whites, obviously. They can be dated, but I grew up with, the Andy Griffith Show, the Lucia Ball.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there are things, excuse me, that were on Nick at Night or TV Land that, like, this makes me a little nostalgic just in that sense. So I thought the look was great. The sound was good. So when you get into these kinds of movies, black and white specifically, it's not so much about the soundtrack, but the sound setting.
Yep.
So how are they kind of creating an environment around you? And I thought they did that really well. I mean, again, this is kind of putting yourself in a position of almost like a post-radio broadcast where they're creating a lot of sound effects to match up with what they're capturing on screen. So they're not capturing, the sound in one boom and the visual on the camera, and they're lining them up later. Like they're doing one or the other, and they're going back and adding something. And I thought it sounded very cool. It was, the classic, like, haunted house movie. I mean, so they kind of built that. There were I would say, funny parts where, like, we see kind of our main character in this apartment. I don't think I got too much of it, but I think she's kind of like renting a room from maybe
her sister.
Yep. And like there was one part where somebody watching it with us was like, "Oh man, the soundtrack," but it was actually like a vinyl happening going on, and she went and turned it off, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that kind of more fits the mood." Like something was going on in the background, and the character themselves recognize that this doesn't fit the scene. So I don't know. Overall, I would say for what we're trying to build, it was very well done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 60s movie, so it sounds like a 60s movie. The few moments where there are a big kind of quote-unquote jump scares still aren't really that big of a thing at this point in filmmaking. But whenever they do kind of happen, or the closest thing that a 60s movie has to a jump scare happens, you have, like, the violin sting, like those were definitely present. Yep. And then what was interesting about this movie in particular, the way that it's set up with the one character whose thoughts that we hear, is that we get a lot of AVR, audio voice recordings, happening that obviously were done in post, which you might not always have gotten quite as much of that as we did in this movie. So we hear a lot of her internal monologue throughout the entire film.
Yeah.
Yep.
Big old echo chambery whisper internal monologue.
Yeah, that talks way too slow.
Yeah.
All right, so was this movie scary?
No. No. And especially, I mean, I feel like this question is a knee-jerk reaction, and it doesn't matter what, like, everything is based on your past and your reaction, and we live in 2019. No, it wasn't scary.
Yeah.
It was a 1960s psychological bender. It wasn't. I mean, like, it no.
A 60s haunted house movie.
Yep.
Like,
Wasn't scary.
yeah.
Nope.
So if we had to pick a scare of the week, I think there's only really one to pick, and that's the door scene. Does anybody have anything other than the door scene?
No.
I guess the first time where Theodora and Eleanor hear the banging for the first time,
Yeah.
that's kind of a good scare moment. I think the actresses played it very well.
Yeah.
Like that's the first time in the
agree.
movie that anyone looks genuinely scared,
Yeah.
and I think they did a really good job of that.
Yeah.
That creepy doorknob that you liked.
Yeah. Exactly.
That was kind of
That
a
was
cool shot.
yeah. There were several parts of that scene that were good. The scene wasn't scary, but it built the moment for what it needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's move on to kill of the week.
I mean, only one person really died.
Only one person
Well, I guess
in the present died.
yeah. I
But
mean,
this
we
house
had-
has
yeah.
claimed many victims.
Yeah. Yeah, we were made privy to a couple deaths.
Yeah, so you have
Mrs. Crane number 1
yes,
in
Crane
the carriage.
in the carriage, Mrs. Crane number 2
down the stairs.
down the stairs, Abigail,
Old lady crazy.
which was daughter Crane that
Yep.
grew into old lady Crane, that she basically died of old age, but she was
Yep.
banging on the walls for help, and her live-in assistant
was banging on the walls
with the farmhands.
and that's the person who hung themselves right off the spiral staircase.
Yeah, was that her?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and so then we have the hanging from the spiral staircase. That's the other kill. I can't remember necessarily who that was, but
I think it was her living assistant.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, outside of the accidental drowning, just the picture of that in my head is just like he's walking around London and like trips and falls and like can't get up out of a puddle. But like outside of that, definitely that stair scene was probably my favorite.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Just the noose from the stairs. Yeah. Or just her climbing up the stairs.
Like her like taking that tumble down.
Oh,
Mrs. Crane number 2.
Crane number 2.
That's,
Yeah.
That would be mine as well.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, like, it's a little dated when she's at the top of the stairs. She takes the frozen, like, scary scene, and then she tumbles.
That
But-
Evil Dead feel kind of thing.
But that last shot of her kind of upside down,
Yeah,
it's
it
a
was
shot, really from the base of the stairs up.
Mm-hmm.
She's upside down. It was a great shot.
I think I liked a lot of this. I guess this kind of harkens back to just talking about the look of the movie. I felt like they did a lot of that, and maybe this was Robert Weiss, or maybe it was director of photography, whoever. They did a lot of interesting camera movements. So there was, that scene, which we've already referenced a couple times, the kind of looking back at the body from the floor, essentially, is a really good shot. And then there was a couple times where like they would move the camera, and so like someone's laying on a bed and the camera kind of comes almost out from under the bed.
Yep.
As it pans up to them. And like I think those moments were all really, really neat and different for the time. Yeah. Like I felt like there was a lot of camera movement in this movie.
There were so many great camera shots.
And even when you get into like the 70s and 80s, like you're like, you notice there's not a lot of movement because it's hard to do the movement and make it be smooth and not be super herky-jerky because we haven't really mastered Steadicam and things like that yet, and we don't have 3-axis gimbals and all of that equipment. So like getting really stable moving shots was either very difficult or very expensive because you're doing an entire dolly and crane and everything. And this movie does a lot of moving camera shots that are really well done.
They did, I think, 2 or 3 like across room zoom-ins that were, I thought, were very impressive for the era that this movie's happening. I think one took place kind of in that scene that we were talking about where it's the first like knocking on the door scene. Both girls are in the room.
Yep.
And it's kind of across the room zoom in on that door. But they did 2 or 3 of those shots I thought were great. The tumble down the stairs for Mrs. Crane number 2, like they followed the body, which was maybe in the moment a little clunky, but when you
Sure.
think about what they're trying to accomplish was
Yeah, that camera
incredible.
movement, like Alex said, was very Evil Dead-ish.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to imagine Sam Raimi not being inspired by that type of camera movement for
Yeah.
sure. I definitely think there are good points to this movie, even though it's probably not our group's typical cup of tea, because we like things that maybe are just a little it's hard to explain. Like, I kind of want to say a little flashier, but then at the same time, like, also a little less flashy, because it's
Yeah.
not like we want all super flashy horror movies, but just, the 60s can be
Just more.
just more. Yeah.
And I think I certainly will plead my ignorance here. I don't know how far we'll be able to go back before we start lumping in multiple decades or kind of a time period.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say we're starting to get to that. We're feeling the age,
Yes.
if that makes sense.
Yes.
Where we naturally just expect a little bit more.
Yep.
Where this feels, this could have crossed so many genre lines. And actually, in our wrap up post, I have a movie that I'm going to I'm going to kind of encourage you, if you dig this. There's a great comedy version of this movie that exists, and they're not too different.
Yeah.
Which is, on first palate, it's like, wait, what? It's a comedy and a serious movie, but really, when you get into the nuts and bolts, they're kind of the same film. So,
Okay, before we get into our final thoughts, I just want to. So Cody and I have both seen Haunting at Hill House Netflix series. So before we move into final thoughts, just tell me, not necessarily super deep compare and contrast about all the similarities and all the differences, but just like between those two, if someone's like, hey, I want to watch something that's based off of this novel, between that series and this movie, kind of what would you say to them?
yeah, I would say watch both.
Yeah.
I would say watch the movie first. So the Netflix series was obviously made this last year. It has all of the bells and whistles of something made in 2018/2019.
Yeah.
It has the practical effects. It has its own adaptation. So when you get to where we are, you can link, okay, we have a haunted house plus the family dynamic plus, hey, let's go ahead and throw in a couple practical effects. Hey, plus we know that this era likes jump scares, but tasteful jump scare. So it can build toward its audience and toward its time.
Yeah, some things in the Netflix series that are definitely modern that don't exist anywhere in the movie would be like something that someone could take away without spoiling anything would be like the Smiling Man.
Yeah. And I would boil it down as far as just character development. Like in the movie, it's so short.
Yeah.
You don't get that build. You're kind of given what that character is, and you got to run with it. And a mini series, can build whatever it wants. So watch the movie first, and actually, it does it a great justice. It sets the same scene, and I would say, tip of the cap to the Netflix series where they're building their sets that look a lot like this house. It's not too far-fetched to where you're saying, hey, this could have taken place in the same, setting. Even the external shots, okay, we got black and white, we got modern day. Obviously, they're not the exact same, but it has that kind of gothic castle-like feature where you're running a bunch of turrets, a couple, multi-story sharp angles, and they start running together.
Yeah.
Both, I would say, in my book, well received. But start with the movie first, is what I would say.
That's cool. I can see that, and I totally respect that. I think there's a certain amount of fun and interest in seeing the Netflix series first, because you because you get a lot more of the character.
Sure.
And then if you watch the movie after that, you're like, oh, all of these little aspects about Theodora were based off of these 2-second moments in the movie. And so, like, I thought that was cool. So, like, in the Netflix series, the character of Theodora, her, like, trademark is that she always wears these leather gloves. And, like, you kind of find out why later on in the series. But, like, the leather gloves make an appearance in the original The Haunting. But there's not really a reason behind them. It's really just a fashion choice. Like, it's not a plot point.
Yeah.
But then in this Netflix series, it was a plot point.
Definitely.
And so I thought that was kind of cool. Just like you could see that like the people who did make the series, they really did watch the movie.
Definitely.
And, were able to take little moments like that, pull them out, and extrapolate.
Expand them.
An
Absolutely.
entire episode of the miniseries is based on those fucking gloves. Like,
Yep. Absolutely.
so I think that's kind of cool. Again, I haven't read the novel. From what I've seen, the film is supposed to be more directly adapted from the novel. So yeah, I think they're both worth a watch as far as that goes. If you're into Haunting a Hill House and understanding what it's been to history from the novelization to the multiple adaptations, because there was also a 1999 remake of The Haunting the movie, which The Haunting the movie is based off of Haunting a Hill House the book, with Liam Neeson. That is totally off the rails. I mean, it's a very 90s horror movie, and is probably the one that's the least like the book because it just goes all in on like the paranormal investigator side, and like it's just nonsense. Okay, let's
So,
move in.
Real quick.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, if you want real quick, layman's terms, if you want a larger character development, watch Netflix, then the movie. If you want a historical perspective, watch movie, Netflix. And if you want like Ace in the Hole, you get everything, I would say movie, Netflix, movie, then 90s adaptation. It's like, okay, you know what's supposed to happen?
Yeah.
Okay, here's your curveball. This is the 90s, way too much. Good luck.
Or maybe somewhere in there we should have actually read the novel if we haven't read it yet.
Well, who has time for reading? Like that's what Audible's for. No, I'm just kidding.
Speaking of which, we're sponsored by no. I'm just kidding. Seriously, Amazon, contact us.
Yeah, if you want us, we're here.
Yeah. All right, Alex, I'm gonna kick it to you for final thoughts. Thumbs up, thumbs down, and then hit us with how many nuggets you think this movie is good for.
I think for someone who's married to someone who doesn't really like scary movies, I would say it's a thumbs up for like a girlfriend night kind of thing or wife night kind of thing.
It's a great perspective.
As far as like, would I watch it by myself again? Probably not.
Yeah.
And even during this, it was hard. Like sometimes I was just like lost because it felt like a rom-com. Mm-hmm. Like the weird interactions between everybody in that house. They all sort of wanted each other. So it was a good watch once. Might be a good watch for couples, but I wouldn't have paid for it.
Yeah.
So no nuggies.
No nuggies. I get that.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm gonna jump.
I'm gonna jump in.
Oh.
I get this
Okay.
thing where I don't like to go last
I'll
on
go
that
last.
because then I'll wrap up, and I
Yep.
hate like going
Sure.
last and then wrapping up because then I
Sure.
feel like I talk for like 15 minutes straight.
Please. Go ahead.
So, you know what? I am gonna say, thumbs down.
Oh.
And I don't know if I've thumbs down anything on the podcast yet. Maybe
Yeah.
only a couple. I tend to be a little more positive. I'm just gonna say thumbs down because it's a decent mystery-y haunted house movie. But I think there's other ones from the era that you could watch instead. I am a big fan of House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price, which, regardless of the name, actually has nothing to do with the novel Haunting a Hill House. The only thing that it really has in common with this movie is a group of people in a haunted house, or an old mansion that is maybe or maybe not haunted. That's
maybe or maybe not on a hill.
Maybe.
So
House on Haunted Hill is, in my opinion, a better movie, and it actually came out, I think, a year before the novel came out.
Oh,
So it's like a 52 or something like that. And yeah, I think it's a better movie. It's more enjoyable for me. It has some of those humor moments still exist in it, and it's a little bit scarier. It's scarier of a movie. So it gets the nod in my opinion. I purchased the DVD of The Haunting just to add it to my collection 2 years ago or so. I paid like $5 for the DVD. I wouldn't movies like this, like that are this old specifically. I don't think necessarily are worth buying on Blu-ray because like
sure,
you're already dealing with probably pretty crappy transfers no matter what. So like, there's no way it's gonna look that much better.
right?
So yeah, I mean, if I'm fine that I spent 50 nuggies on it to add to the collection, but I probably will not pull it out and watch it unless I'm doing it for a specific reason. Like, oh, we're gonna do a whole marathon of haunted house movies or something like that. Like,
Sure.
it's a nice one to have in the quiver, but I'm not super amped by it.
Yeah. I'm gonna take a hard left turn off of that. I'm gonna say thumbs up. I actually enjoyed it. I would say I think it's important to note that I think this would have been actually a better view, maybe not with a large party.
Yeah.
I think we took a lot of moments, and I don't know how you watch your horror movies. We watch it in a party of 4 to 7 people, and we don't really. I guess we welcome the comedic moments, and so if there's something really stupid, really lame, really obvious to jump on in that moment, we'll make that joke. And so I would say this movie, maybe by yourself, maybe 1 or 2 other people, try to focus on it. There's a movie called, I think I'm a sucker of haunted house movies of this era.
Sure.
And so there's actually a comedy movie which isn't too far separated from this called The Ghost of Mr. Chicken with Don Knotts. And it's great. And I think because I grew up with that movie, like this is like the serious version of that.
Gotcha.
This is, this is Batman versus like Batman Forever. Batman Forever is the comedy version. Batman is the good version. I don't know how to really split these hairs. I'm gonna say thumbs up. I really enjoyed it. I think you got to kind of limit your expectations. It is, it is made in the '60s. There are limited, effects to this. It is more of a Twilight Zone. There were many moments in this movie that I felt like I was watching a long episode of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Twilight Zone, I wouldn't label as horror.
Right.
I wouldn't do it. And so I think it's just important to know what you define as enjoyable or horror. But for me personally, thumbs up. I would say, 10 to 20 nuggies. I mean, stay realistic here. I mean, $1 to $2. You find this at. I'm thinking. I live right around the corner from. I know it's antiquated, but Family Video, where I could have picked this up for 50 cents if they had it on DVD. If they had it, 50 cents out the door. So, keep limited expectations, but I thought very enjoyable.
Nice. All right. Any other final thoughts before we close out? No.
I am, as we continue to go back in time, I'm terrified for my ignorance. So I will say that.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that does it for us here on episode 12. So The Haunting gets the official seal of approval from us here at the Eek Show, Eek Podcast. Next week, we do have something a little special in store for you. If everything works out, we will not be doing 50s horror. we might be taking a bit of a turn. You can stay tuned to Instagram for kind of the details on that. That being said, just follow us on Instagram anyway because you think it's really cool. So that's at Eek Channel. And again, every 100 followers, we'll give away another Blu-ray. So, tag your friends, tell them to follow us, we'll make it happen, and you could potentially be winning some free movies. So it's always a good thing, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Stay eeky out there.